Hi, welcome to the Knitting Expat Podcast. My name is Mina and I'm your host today. Welcome to episode 123. I'm coming to you from where I'm living right now at my parents' in London. My husband, daughter and I are currently staying at my parents' whilst some stuff gets sorted. If you've been watching for a while, you will be fully aware of our situation, and if you're new, thank you, welcome for joining along for this adventure. And I won't bore you with the details, but we're just temporarily staying here right now. I'll talk more about that actually in a little bit. But anyway, so welcome. Today is Wednesday the 6th of June. I have my laptop just off to the side here, so I've got my notes on there. So if you keep looking across, that's all that is. Just checking. Layla's having a nap right now. Layla is my daughter, so she's having a nap right now, and I've just had my lunch, so I'm taking this opportunity to try and record a podcast. It has been about what, 3 weeks since I last recorded. I try to do it every other week, but to be quite honest, life and stuff just gets in the way and it's not always possible to do that. But I seem to be hitting an every 3 week mark at the moment, so we're just gonna go with it. And yeah, so you can find me online as Knitting Expat on Instagram. You can find me as Mina Phillip on Ravelry, and the Knitting Expat Podcast on Ravelry in the groups tab. I do have show notes for this and all previous episodes. You can find that at knittingexpat.wordpress.com. And everything's linked below this video on YouTube or wherever else you find it. You will find links to everywhere else that you can find me online. I also sell my patterns, my knitting patterns, on Ravelry as well as Knitting Expat Designs. Again, that's also linked below this video for you as well. If any of the links ever aren't working, just let me know and I'll check it and fix it for you. Like I said, I do have show notes, so I will have the details of everything I show you in the show notes. I don't necessarily always link everything just because it's not always practical, and to be honest, most of my projects are my own designs, and therefore they don't actually have pages up yet to be able to link pattern pages yet, because they're in progress. But I do always tell you when a new design has been released, so then you can go check that out if you want to. Obviously you don't have to. Okay, so before we get started, I have a few things that I wanted to go over with you guys, and this is another reason I want to record, because I know for the next couple of weeks I'm going to be really busy and I won't have time. So basically I'm going to be back in New York at the end of next week, so for just sort of like a long weekend period. I'm going on my own, so I'm leaving Layla and Perry behind, which in itself is a little bit nerve-wracking. So I'm going back for a number of reasons. There are a few things I need to sort out. I've mentioned before that the reason, and if you've been watching for a while, you'll already know this, and if you're new or you don't remember, essentially, we were living in New York for a year, for most of 2017 basically. We were in New York, and then early this year we moved back to the UK because the kind of visa we had was a 1-year visa. And we applied to get a different kind of visa so that we could stay for longer, because we really enjoyed our time there. We didn't, it didn't work out the first time we applied, and but my husband's company are determined to get him back there, so they applied again this year, and we're still waiting for the for the outcome of that. But it looks like, having spoken to people, lawyers and stuff like that, it looks like things are headed in the right direction. But there's no guarantees that we will get one in any case. So whilst things are progressing, they are going very, very slowly right now, and it could be as late as like the end of this year, beginning of next year, before we get any sort of resolution one way or the other. So with that in mind, and there again, if you've been watching for a while, you know that we also have 2 cats, which we left behind in New York because at the time, and with the information we had, that was the best decision that we could make for them. It was the least stressful. We don't actually have anywhere for them to stay in the UK because, like I said, we're staying at my parents', and their house isn't really suitable for cats. So and they've never really had pets, so for them it's quite an adjustment to suddenly have 2 cats around as well. And anyway, so it was the best decision we could make for them at the time, was to leave them in New York. They've been very well cared for by friends and pet sitters and stuff like that. And there again, Perry's travelled back and forth a few times for work stuff as well, so they haven't been completely, abandoned or anything. They're very well taken care of. But since things look like they're not going to be changing very soon in terms of like getting a resolution. We had hoped that by like midsummer we would know what was happening, but it looks like it's going to be more like the end of the year, early next year at best. So with that in mind, we've decided to bring the cats back to the, I say back, bring them to the UK. They've never been to the UK. They're very well travelled cats. So that's one of the reasons I need to go back, is to get them their vaccinations up to date and get all sorts of, like, a whole bunch of other stuff organised as well. And then Perry's going to be flying over a couple of weeks after to actually deal with them being picked up and transported over, and then I'll be on this end to pick them up. It's a huge logistical nightmare, to be quite honest, because Perry's entering a very busy period at work, and it's just all coming, it was all happening at once. So initially, like I mentioned, we don't have anywhere for them to, they can't stay with us in London, but they're going to stay at Perry's parents' house. They are very used to having pets. They have had pets up until towards the end of last year. They've had pets as long as I've known them, essentially. And so yeah, so they've agreed to take the boys in for a while until Perry and I sort out a more permanent living situation for ourselves, because it's going to take so much longer, and we've been here for coming up to 5 months. It's been great being able to stay at my parents'. It's been great for them to be around Layla and for us to have the extra help, but I think we're getting to that point now where it's time for us to like have our own space again, and especially because we don't know how long this is going to take. I don't want to impose too long on them, and you know, anyway, I know they don't mind. They would love it if we just stayed, but it's not practical, and I'm looking forward to having our whole family together again, like me, Perry, Layla and the cats. So yes, that's the plan. Hopefully within the next few weeks we will have the boys back and all be together again, which would be so lovely. And yeah, so they're probably going to stay at Perry's parents for a few weeks whilst we sort stuff out. And yeah, so I just wanted to give you guys an update, because stuff is going to be happening, and I'm not necessarily going to be able to share everything that's going on, but I just wanted to give you guys a bit of a heads up. And if things go a bit crazy or I go a bit silent for a while, it's just because there's a lot of logistics to deal with. We're having to put some stuff into storage in New York, so again, I'm gonna have, that's one of the things I'm sorting out while I'm there. And oh, the other big thing, this is the thing that's actually relevant for you guys, is I'm going to have a huge destash. I'm going to get rid of so much yarn, not because I want to, but because just realistically speaking, it's stuff, anything that is, you know, anything that I keep is going to go into storage, and I don't know when it's going to come out of storage. I mean, hopefully it won't be that long, but it could be up to like 6 months or longer. So I'm going to destash a lot of yarn, try and bring back what I think I will use, but since a lot of the stuff I do right now is design work anyway, a lot of my personal yarn stash isn't going to get used for a while, so a lot of that I'm probably going to destash. So stay tuned, there will be a huge destash. It's going to be a very short time frame because I'm only there for like 3 or 4 days, so I'm going to try and get the destash up on the Friday, which would be the 15th of June, and then basically anything that's sold, and then anything that's sold over that weekend will go out on Monday, because I leave Monday night. So I'm just going to do one big run to the post office and send everything out Monday morning, and just send it all off. I will preface this by saying that I'm not going to deal with international shipping. It's just going to be domestic US, just to keep things simple for myself. Just I don't have a lot of time to faff around with trying to figure out postage and stuff like that, international postage and rates and things like that. So I'm gonna put that out there now, and I apologize for anyone who might want to get something who isn't within the US. I might open it up for Canadians as well, just because that is simpler to figure out. But anyway, I'm not sure how I'm gonna do the destash yet. Depends how much yarn there is. It's gonna be some mini skeins, like scraps, all sorts of stuff that's going to be going into this. I think I even have some books. I have some sewing supplies, some fabrics, like a whole bunch of stuff. So there'll be some sort of like grab bag type situations, and there'll be some like sweater quantities, all sorts going into this. Like I said, I'm really having to size down, and you know, we're going through like donating a whole bunch of stuff to Goodwill, and you know, all that sort of stuff is happening. Which is fine, and to be honest, I feel really good whenever I have a good purge or a good like declutter and stuff like that. So it's been a long time coming, and I tried to do that a little bit before we came back to the UK, and then again now. So after having done several moves, a couple of them international as well, I've gotten very good at just going through and being quite emotionally detached from my things. Sometimes I can be quite a sentimental person and get very emotionally attached to certain things because they remind me of certain things, but over the years I've become much better at just being like looking at things more objectively. Just to sum it all up, there's going to be a destash coming soon, and so end of next week essentially. So stay tuned. It will be most likely on Instagram. I'll either set up a separate Instagram account or do it on Insta stories. I haven't figured out which yet, so stay tuned. I'll post all the details about that on Instagram next week, so please bear that in mind. It's not going to be on Ravelry, it's not going to be on Etsy, it's not going to be on any other format, so you will have to be following me on Instagram to get the updates if you want to, or check it out on Instagram if that's what you want to do. And I am Knitting Expat, all one word, on Instagram, and there's a link to that below. Okay, so let's move on. My next announcement is also partly finished object related as well, so we'll do that all together. I released a pattern this last week. Actually, since the last time we spoke, I think I've released 2 patterns. I released this one, the Parisian Dreams pullover, which is this pullover that I designed a couple months ago and finally got around to publishing after all my lovely testers got back to me. And I think this wasn't, I don't think this was published last time we spoke. I can't remember now. But and I've also published the star hat, which this is actually one of the adult sizes. I think this is the adult medium or adult large, I can't remember which size I knit now. But this is one of the adult sizes of the star hat, and it's called the star hat because the crown shaping is in the shape of a star. You can see that there. And the yarn that I used is by Lavender Loon Yarn Company, and this is on her worsted 100% merino base, and it's in the throat punch colourway. This was actually, she sent me 4 skeins to use for a design which I actually knit the garden gnome hoodie for children, which is what I designed out of it. And I had enough left over from, I actually only ended up using about 2.5 skeins, so I used the other half a skein to knit a child-size version of this hat for Layla, which you've seen before. And then I had a whole 100-gram skein left, so I knit this adult-size one as a gift. And this one was a slightly bluer skein, like there was a bit more blue in it than the others which had more of the red in it. So I'd kept this one back. Even though I'd alternated throughout, I kept this one out in case to use as a just in case I needed it, because it was such a different colour to the others. From what I know of how this colourway is dyed up, it's very labour intensive. So, and as with most hand dyed yarns, you know, there are variations between skeins even in the same dye lot. So it's not an issue, but it's something to bear in mind. And like I said, I did alternate throughout with that one as well. I'll show you what the hat looks like on. My hair's up right now, so it looks a little bit funny, but it's just got a 1x1 rib, and then this really fun, simple texture broken seed stitch. I'm not sure how to show you the back of the hat, if you can see that there. I'm not sure if you can see that. I hope you can see something. And it looks really weird with my hair tied up, because it just looks a bit odd right now. But it is really nice. It's got a very, it doesn't even have that much slouch in it at all right now. So this is more like the beanie style. It's a loose fit beanie, so it's not super tight on your head. I would say that's probably the best way to describe it. And the one I knit for Layla is actually the child size rather than the baby toddler size, only because it's getting, you know, it was the beginning of summer, early spring, when the weather's getting warmer, and I really didn't think that she was going to need a hat in her current size, so I'd knit it like a size bigger, and it's a pretty good fit. Like, it's big, but it's not too big that she can't wear it either. So she has worn it a couple of times actually when the weather got a bit cold. But that's that. As for needle sizes and stuff, I find I always forget to mention it, but they are on the show notes. So if I ever forget to mention what needle size I'm using, you can just check out the show notes and the details will be there. This used a 3.5mm for the cuff and a 4mm for the body. So that's US 5 and US 6. Next up, I have 3 more finished objects, which are all socks. I have finished a bunch of socks lately, and if I'm not mistaken, these are all vanilla socks. So I knit my vanilla socks pretty much the same. The only difference may be in stitch count and in length of leg or something. So they are all knit on 2.25mm US 1s. I use either high sharps or chagus, and I tend to use long cable needles. I do magic loop, either 2 at a time or concurrent, 1 at a time. I mean, at the same time but on separate needles. Those are my preferred methods of knitting. I always use my German short row heel pattern and mini heel flap and gusset, which is pretty much in most of my sock patterns that I've published in the last year and a bit. So, alright, we'll go in chronological order. The first pair that I finished was out of this beautiful yarn by Adelaide Cottage. I'm not sure if Shauna's dyeing yarn at the moment, but actually I'm pretty sure she is. She's back to dyeing now, I think. Don't quote me on that, but check out her shop. and this is in the Atlantis colorways. It's on her Stellina sparkly base. You can see that picking up a little bit on camera there. And yeah, it's just a really lovely sort of purpley blue colour, and it's really even throughout. I find sometimes with hand dyed yarns one end of the skein can be more saturated than the other, and this one is actually very well dyed throughout, being very equal. So that's a gift, actually. Most of these are gift knits. The next pair is actually for me. This is some self-striping yarn from Biscot Yarns. They're Canadian, from Montreal, I believe, or somewhere in Quebec, and French Canada, basically. And this is in the Arc en Ciel. I think it's rainbow colorway, basically. And I picked this up at my first Vogue Knitting Live. This is actually one of my first purchases that year as well. So yeah, and I finally knit it up. I'd always intended on knitting this as just plain socks for myself. I had thought about putting a pattern on it. I wanted to put a pattern on it, but then I needed it for cinema knitting, so I didn't put a pattern on it in the end. So those are for me. And finally, my most recently finished pair of socks is this pair. And these will be for my dad for Father's Day, which I'm not actually here for. I'm going to be in the US for Father's Day, but you know, in advance I've got everything ready. And this is knit out of Little Bean Loves Yarn, and this is in her Mooney colorway, on the Everyday Sock base, which is her 75/25 superwash merino nylon. And just to prove that, you know, I'm not a perfect sock knitter, I do make mistakes. I realised this when I was halfway down the leg. I messed up in the ribbing at the beginning. So at one point, instead of doing a knit 2, purl 2, I sort of purl 2 and then knit 2 where the purls should have been. So there's a little blip in my sock. Don't care. It's a sock. No one's going to look at them that closely to notice, and my dad won't care. He won't notice unless I told him, which I won't. So that's that pair of socks. And then last night I finished another project. This one was a long time coming, and I'm so excited to have it finished. It has been living in my Thimble and Thread Make project bag with all of my pins on it, and yeah, let's show you. You might get a little hint at what it is. So I was designing, if you've been watching for a while or you've been following me on Instagram, you'll know that recently I published the Double Dutch cardigan, which is a cabled shawl collar cardigan for children. And then I set about designing the adult version because so many people had asked for an adult size version of it. And so I did, and I used some yarn. I'll show you the yarn first. I used some lovely yarn from Lauren of Lolo Did It, and this is her Whole Lotta DK base, which is a 250 gram skein of 85% Polworth and 15% silk. It is a non-superwash yarn, and the colorway is Make It Rain. So the silk gives it a lovely sheen without being shiny. So it's really nice. It's got this nice sort of woolly feel to it without being scratchy. It's just really, really lovely yarn. I'm trying to find the label. And the colorway is Make It Rain, which, if I'm not mistaken, is an Ed Sheeran song reference. And in terms of yarn details, you get 725 yards per 250 grams, which I believe is somewhere around the 500 meter range. Anyway, so she sent me 3 skeins, which is a good thing because I did need the 3rd skein. But as you can see, there's still a lot left. There's about 200 grams, or just over 200 grams left of the 3rd skein. So the size that I knit was the 42-inch bust size. So it's actually the 3rd size in the pattern, and it used 550 grams. So there we go. This is the finished. I finished it last night. I finished the 2nd sleeve. So I'm not sure at what point it was the last time I showed it to you guys, but this is where it's at now. I would try it on, but it's not blocked, and it kind of sits funny at the moment, so until it gets a good wash and layout, it's all a little bit funny looking. I had some questions on Instagram about whether I alternated skeins, and I'll talk about that in a second. And so you can see the triple Dutch cardigan has 2 cables running down the back, whereas the only difference between this and the children's one is the children's one only has the one of these cables running down the back, and the adult one has 2. Otherwise it has the same front cables running down either side, and the other side as well. The only other thing I need to do now is get buttons for it. I haven't got any buttons yet, so we will see. I might see if I have anything appropriate when I'm back in New York already. I don't think I do, but is anything left I have to do for it? What ends are all woven in. So what I did in terms of alternating skeins, and I always suggest you should alternate throughout, but I don't always do that myself. So in the interest of being honest, this is what I did. I didn't alternate until I got to the point where I added the front cable, the side cables in. So this whole, from where I cast on down to here, I didn't alternate because there was a fair amount of like rapid increasing going on, and I knew that in itself would break up the variegation. And then from here I started alternating, and then alternated the rest of the body. I didn't alternate in the ribbing at the end, because again I find with ribbing always sort of screws up the gauge anyway, just because of the way I say screw up, it doesn't screw up, it changes the gauge anyway. So, and it's not as noticeable if there's pooling in the ribbing, I find. And there is a little bit, but it's not so much that it bothers me. Like, it's really not an issue. I also didn't alternate on the collar either. Again, the collar doesn't lay flat right now because it hasn't been blocked properly, but I don't alternate on the ribbing of the collar either. I basically don't alternate when I'm doing ribbing. I don't know why. There's nothing to say that you shouldn't or you can't, but I didn't. So there's that. I did alternate on the sleeves for both. Again, I didn't bother alternating on the ribbing at the bottom. I alternated on this one, I alternated all the way to the end, and the other I was working on the sleeve and it was knitting up a bit differently. As you can see here, I was alternating, and I alternated all the way down to about here where the decreases stop, and I noticed there was some pooling happening. Pooling doesn't really bother me. I know it bothers a lot some people, and even though I was alternating, it was still pooling a bit. And so I got to about here, a few rows after I'd done the last decrease, and then I just stopped alternating because I was like, let's do this anyway, and the stitch count isn't going to change anymore. So I just stopped alternating, and it didn't really pool again. It's kind of done this weird micro striping thing, but that's just because there's a number of stitches. And so that's how the second sleeve worked out. It's just the way it is. Doesn't bother me at all. And that's what I did in terms of alternating. All in all, again, if you follow on Instagram, you'll know that I was keeping track of the progress on this and how many hours I spent knitting it. So I always track when I start and when I finish a project, but I've not really ever sat down, especially with garments, and tracked exactly the number of hours it has taken to knit or design a garment. So for those of you who are interested in the numbers and the facts and figures, I spent a grand total of 53 or 53 hours knitting that cardigan. That was just the knitting time. There was probably another 6 to 10 hours in there for the actual designing, the maths, the writing up the pattern, the drafting, the working out the sizes, the grading, and I've actually had a question about how I learnt to grade patterns. I kind of just figured it out on my own. There was no real, I kind of start with my size, and then, or the size that I knit the sample in, and then work up and down from that. I haven't done a course or like taken any classes on that. I've just sort of figured it out for myself. I'm fairly confident with maths, so it's not something that intimidated me to try and do. Anyway, and I also started designing with children's garments, which are a lot more forgiving with their sizing, and once I felt more confident in how I was figuring that out, I then felt confident to do the adult sizes. So that's that. So another 6 to 10 hours on that side of things. So the only thing left, and I say the only thing left, what's left now is the time for you know, getting the pattern tech edited, doing the edits, getting it rechecked, and like going through that set of steps, which in itself will be a couple of hours at least on my end, not to mention a few hours on the tech editor's end. Then there's the photography. I still have to get buttons for it, so the buttons on, do the photography, block it, then there's the whole situation of getting it tested, which again is not a palaver or anything, but it does take time, it takes effort, it takes, like, you know, I've got to contact the testers, I've got to then like go through, select the people who are going to test it, send out the email with all the information, and then having the constant check-in with the testers, answering questions and checking the pattern, making changes, all that sort of stuff as the test knit goes on, and then finally finalizing the pattern, getting a final check over from the tech editor before publishing. I mean, that's my process anyway. So all in all, I mean, it takes a while to design a pattern and get it ready to be published. There's a lot of work that goes into it. It's not just the knitting. And depending on the size of the garment, the knitting might be the bulk of the time, but there's actually, it might only be like 60% of the time is the actual knitting part. There's a whole other 40% of time, of the overall time, that is spent just working on the back end, essentially the bits that you don't see. So yeah, a lot of work goes into it, and I hadn't really figured that out for myself. And this is a DK weight cardigan. A fingering weight pullover might take longer because it's finer yarn, but yeah, so I'd never actually sat down to figure out the maths behind it, so it was interesting for me as well to see how that worked out. And there were a few times along the way, there weren't actually that many with this particular pattern, but there were a few times along the way where I had to change what I was doing, or what I'd planned to do, or what I had originally figured out numerically wasn't working out, so I had to go back and redo the calculations and recheck something, or change my plans or whatever. So that obviously adds more time to the whole thing. But for example, sleeve 1 took me about 6 hours to knit, sleeve 2 took like 3.5 hours to knit, just because I'd figured everything out along as I went for sleeve 1, but then for sleeve 2, because I'd already done it once, it was just a lot quicker to work through it. So yeah, that's my design process, and I thought I'd give you a little peek into my design folder. I never really had a sort of proper way of like storing my design ideas. It was just sort of jotted down here and there in different notebooks, but then I was like, you know what, I need to be a bit more organized about this. So I now have a design notebook or folder rather. So I'll show you quickly how I've got it organized. So this was like initial sort of like sketch and then sizing grading calculations for the Parisian Dreams pullover, which is the one that I'm wearing. And then I've got actually all my pattern notes in this one like plastic wallet folder thing here. Once I'm done with the design, I sort of put it all into one folder. I've got like my initial chart that I've written up, and then my swatch is in here as well. And then I have another one in here for another design collaboration that I'm working on, and that's the swatch for it there. And I also stick a little piece of paper in with like the gauge information, so I don't have to keep remeasuring it for later. And then there's another design that I'm currently working on, which will be in work in progress, which again I had my initial sort of sketch ideas. I don't always do a sketch, but I sometimes do a little rough sketch to sort of remember what sort of features I want to put into the design. And then my initial like scribblings, I've actually done a neater write out version of this, because this would have been hard for me to follow when knitting, and I probably would have forgotten what I was talking about. And then I've got my swatches, which you will have seen on a previous episode, and again my gauge information, so I can see the differences. Oh, and this is the one for the hoodie pullover. See, for this one I hadn't done a drawing, I've just figured out sizes, and again with the gauge. So that's kind of how I've organised it. Most of these are actually already finished designs. So yeah, and this is the swatch from the cardigan I just showed you. And yeah, and then I've got a couple of other patterns in here that don't have. Okay, so my camera stopped recording, and I was just chattering to myself apparently. So basically what I was trying to say was at the end of that I just have one of these square ruled notepads, and then as I'm writing my notes I kind of just like stick them into these plastic wallets which I work from, and then pull it out to make changes or whatever, and then when I'm done it goes back into the folder. And that's kind of how my process is. It's not particularly exciting, it's not particularly glamorous. it's just practical. And at some point, this is the current sweater I'm working on, which I'll show you. I'm hoping probably this Friday I'll have a chance to at least start typing that up, so it's on the computer. It's a lot easier to make edits when stuff's already typed up. Anyway, so let's move on to works in progress and what I have on my needles. I don't actually have that much on the needles. I only have 2 active projects. First up is a pair of socks, and this is another design for, I think this is for the Wanderlust sock club. This is actually the last pattern in the club, is going to be this one. So I want to show you the pattern side. So this is the yarn that I'm using, and if it will focus, that'll be lovely. There we go. So this is Sweet Sparrow yarns. I believe it's her Magpie base, which is her Stellina base, and it's in the Clara colorway, which I believe is a reference to the Nutcracker, if I'm not mistaken. And yeah, I'm past the heel, I'm onto the foot. For both socks now. The other one is slightly, like maybe a couple of repeats shorter than the one I just showed you, but that's coming along. I'm not in any hurry. Like I said, this pattern's not coming out till November, so I have some time, but it'll probably get finished up soonish, I think. And speaking of the sock club, there are 2 sock clubs if you're new. There's the Wanderlust sock club and the Cozy sock club. The Wanderlust sock club is aimed more at beginner or new sock knitters, and the Cozy sock club is aimed more at people who've been knitting socks for a while and just looking for something a little bit different, something a little bit more advanced. Not super advanced or super difficult by any stretch. I still think both clubs are really easy fun knits, but I feel like some of the techniques in the Cozy sock club might be a little bit much for someone who's just starting out knitting socks, and they might want to start with something a bit more basic before moving on to that. That's just kind of how I differentiated it. The intermediate sock club isn't meant to be difficult. It's not meant to be a challenging sock club. It's all meant to be fun. It's all meant to be good fun. Having said that, there is actually prizes that are due to be drawn for the Cozy sock club that was supposed to be drawn at the end of May. I haven't drawn them yet. I just realised now I haven't done that. I meant to do it. But what I'm going to do is, because I'm still waiting for a couple of people to get back to me from the prizes I drew on the last podcast, is I'm going to give them a couple more weeks. Once I get back from New York, I'm going to draw the prizes for the Cozy sock club from the end of May, redraw any prizes that haven't been claimed yet, and then also the Changes shawl knit along will have ended by then, so then I'll draw prizes for everything and do one separate prize winners video. I get a better response from those videos than when they're in the podcast, because I know the podcast can be a bit long to watch sometimes, so there's that. I realised I just went off on a bit of a tangent. I was talking about works in progress. Anyway, my next work in progress is living in this beautiful pink hazel bag, which was sent to me by the lovely Kelsey from Primrose Yarn Company, along with the yarn that I'm using for the project inside it. So I'm using her, get the labels out, I'm using her Margot base, which is an MCN, Merino Cashmere Nylon. It's a high twist MCN. It's an 80% superwash merino, 10% cashmere, 10% nylon. It's 150 gram skein, so they are chunky skeins. 595 yards per skein. And the colourways, if I can get them in the right order, or at least match them up correctly with the right labels. So this one is Morticia. So this is the darkest in the set. Then I have 2 skeins of Morticia. Then we have this one, which I will show, which is From London with Love. Really beautiful sort of purpley undertones to that one. Get that to balance there. Then we have this one, which is From the Picket Line or the Parade, which is again really beautiful. And then we have this one, which is called Crime of Passion. And finally, we have When Legos Attack. And this is the order in which they are being used. And yeah, so that's the order in which they are going into the pullover, starting from the lightest, going to the darkest. And then the idea I have is that the sleeves are going to be knit out of the darkest colour, Morticia, and the other colours will be striped in towards the bottom. That's the idea. I might not do the striping, it just depends, see how it looks when I get to that point. So where I'm currently at is, I've got a whole bunch of needles because I've put stuff on, spare cables and things like that. This is where I'm at. So the style of this pullover is actually the same as the Parisian Dreams. It's a drop shoulder boxy style pullover. The difference is this one is knit top down, and the Parisian Dreams was knit bottom up. So I went with a different technique for this one. Also because I personally prefer top down construction. I did something different with this one because I wanted to try something new and I like how it turned out. But I also wanted to work out for myself how to do this top down. And yeah, I'm not gonna lie, it was a bit of a challenge, and I'll explain why in a second, because this particular design had some interesting design challenges that went along with it. But where I'm at now is I've finished with the first colour in the body, and I've finished with the second colour in the body as well. It's just sort of curling up at the bottom so you can't really see. This side has this really fun sort of waffle texture to it, which if you are knitting or have knit the Change Your Shawl pattern, it's the same texture that's in section B of that pattern. And the back is in stockinette. I mean, I'm calling this the back, but you may notice with the neckline that it's the same on the front and back. That is because this is intended to be a completely reversible garment. You can wear it either with this as the front, or you can wear it with this as the front, depending on what you fancy that day. So that was the intention of this design, was that it's not got a super low neckline. It's actually got a neckline very similar to this. It might be a little bit wider. I don't actually know. I have to try it on now that it's done. I think Layla just woke up. Hopefully she'll go back to sleep. She's calmed down. So I'm hoping she'll go back to sleep for a little bit longer. If not, I'll have to go get her. But I'll finish talking about this quickly. So yeah, so I've done the first two colours in the body. And then I decided I wanted to see how the sleeve was going to work out with the way I had envisaged. So I picked up one of the sleeves and I'm knitting away on it. One thing I have noticed is that when I pick up, because I'm picking up in a different colour than I had on the sleeve before, is that, and you're not picking up every single stitch, where you're skipping a stitch, you sometimes get this little colour pulling up there. It's not as obvious on the waffle side, it's a little bit more obvious on the stockinette side. And it's a lot less obvious now that I've knit a few rows than it was when I first picked it up, I will be honest. So I'm thinking that will block out and it will even out and be okay. It's not that obvious, it really isn't. So I think that'll be fine. But quickly to touch on what was difficult about the design of this particular garment. And if I show you the swatches, you'll see what I mean. So because I want this to be a completely reversible garment, the widths on the front and the back have to be the same, in my mind. Anyway, that's how I wanted it to be. And if you can see on my swatch, let me just take this out, it'll be easier to show you. If you can see on the swatch, the stockinette swatch is not as wide. I mean, the paper there is obscuring that, but you'll see. You get the idea that the stockinette swatch is not as wide as the waffle swatch. And if you can see on my gauge information there, yeah, the stockinette swatch is 1.5 stitches less per inch than the waffle swatch. So the waffle swatch is 5 stitches to the inch. The stockinette is 6.5 stitches to the inch. So that's quite a sizable difference, which made planning this a bit difficult. I mean, this sweater would not have worked bottom up because you would get to the shoulders and you would have a different number of stitches on one side than you do on the other. So top down was really the only way this was going to work. And I'll show you here. So you actually cast on for the stockinette side first because that has the most number of stitches. That has more stitches than that needs more stitches than the waffle. And then when you come to pick up to do the front, you just pick up fewer stitches essentially and start working the waffle pattern. And you can see the width, I mean, it's curling on the edge here so it's hard to see, but it doesn't, you know, the width works out perfectly that way as long as you've got the right number of stitches to account for the differences in gauge. So that was the big challenge with this one, I will be honest. And then figuring out increases. I kept the increases the same on the front and back because I wanted the neckline to be mirror imaged, and if I did fewer increases on the front than on the back, it would have looked different. But where I took that into account was with the joining the front sides together, you end up casting on a few stitches at the front here, and along the back. So along the back you end up casting on more stitches than you do along the front to get the same overall width dimensions as it is. So yeah, once that was all sorted and the piece was all joined together and I got past the armholes and it was all joined in the round again, and then it was smooth sailing. At that point I was like, that's in my opinion, for me anyway, that was the big challenging part of this whole thing, was to get the shoulders and the neckline to work essentially. So I'm actually really happy with how that one turned out. I'm really, as it is right now, I'm quite happy with it. I'm looking forward to it, and once this first sleeve gets done, I'll probably end up doing the second sleeve and then continue with the body, because at that point the body is just going to be really simple, pretty much mindless knitting. So it's nice to have, you know, change up the way you knit things sometimes. So that's that project. And that's really it in terms of works in progress. I don't have anything else right now on the needles. The only other thing I have to show you kind of moves into acquisitions. So I did start I did do another swatch, which was from some yarn that was sent to me recently, and I haven't had a chance to show you yet. So if I show you the swatch again really quickly, this was the swatch. And ignoring the contrast colour, which was just some scrap yarn that I used for the swatch because I didn't have time to wind up more yarn. This was the yarn I used for the swatch. It's really lovely. It's showing up a little bit more red on screen. It's a bit more of like a burgundy, sort of darker red colour. And this yarn is from Mon Sheep Shop, the lovely Cindy in France. And this is the I think it's Terre Brûlée colourway. Where did the label go? The label's still in the middle. Okay. I'll just go ahead and show you the yarns. So these are the yarns that this is some of the yarn that she sent me. She sent me, there we go, 3 skeins of this sort of burgundy dark red, and 2 skeins of this sort of like purpley grey with that same sort of purpley dark burgundy red sort of speckled throughout it, for a pullover design, an adult sized one. And yeah, Terre Brûlée is the red colour, and the speckled is Liqueur de Épine Noir. I'm really bad at this. I'm really bad at this. I will make a note in the show notes of all the colorways that she sent me, because they're all in French and I'm apparently terrible at that right now. I used to be told I had a very good French accent when I was in school and studying French, and it all seems to have just disappeared. She also sent me these 3 skeins of this really sort of like bright, sort of like scarlet red, and this one, which is very similar to the other speckled, but they are slightly different. They're very subtly slightly different. This one is definitely more of a cooler grey, and this is more of a purpley grey. And this one has like the same sort of like red speckling in it. So this one, let's see if I can read these. This is Big Bad Wolf. I can read that one. This one is Big Bad Wolf. And this one is Little Red Hood, is this one. So Little Red Riding Hood theme going on there, which actually gives me a pretty good idea for the name for the pattern. And this is going to be the child size version of the same design. So this will be the first time I am tandem designing the adult and child size version at the same time. And I wanted similar but not the same colorways. So the brighter, more sort of like, you know, Layla looks amazing in red, and this is a really sort of like true sort of like red. And I wanted that for her because I think for children, like the nice bright bold colours is something they can pull off. Whereas with adults, I think like the slightly darker, more like moody kind of colours sort of suit my tone a bit better. anyway for me. I kind of like the contrast. They look the same without being identical, if that makes sense. But along with all of that lovely yarn, Cindy very kindly sent along a little gift for Layla. She sent along Annabelle the frog. How cute is this? This is so adorable, and I didn't realise till after, but the little trousers come off. A little like blue underneath. It's so cute. It is so adorable, and it's got a little flower brooch pinned on it. It's such a beautiful thing, and I really appreciate handmade gifts like this, especially like knitted or crocheted toys. I have knit Layla a bonbon bunny before she was born. I knit one, and it killed my hands. Absolutely killed it. I don't enjoy knitting toys because of the tight gauge that's required to knit them. I really just don't enjoy it. So I really appreciate when I get a gift from somebody, for Layla especially, when it's a handmade gift like this, especially like a toy that's been crocheted or hand knit. It's just because I know how hard it can be on your hands, and I really appreciate it a lot, and she loves it. It's so cute. I had to kind of like sneak it away from her. I haven't let her play with it because I didn't want her to get it dirty before I got a chance to show it on the podcast. Not that she gets stuff dirty very often. She's actually pretty good with stuff like that. The other thing I wanted to show you guys was a couple of weeks, well I say a couple of weeks, was it not this weekend just gone, the weekend before, we were down at Perry's parents for the bank holiday long weekend, and it was also the Heathfield show, which is a local agricultural show right by where my in-laws live. It's actually, my father-in-law was telling us, it's the largest one-day show in the south of England, I believe. Like an agricultural show of its kind. So it's pretty big, really big. And whilst it was aimed more at like farmers, it's very much a farming agricultural type of show. It's not a fibre show. But they had stuff there for the whole family, and they had like animals and different stalls that were selling like outerwear, and there was all sorts of stuff. But there was also, we still I should backtrack. This is kind of getting into like some weekend review stuff, but I also met up with, at the show, I met up with Madeline, who is Kingfisher Knits on Instagram, and she's the Kingfisher Knits podcast, and we got to meet up there. I met up with her and met her children and her parents, and we got to hang out for a bit during the day with Perry and Layla and her family. And then later Perry took Layla back home, and Madeline's parents took her kids, so the two of us got to spend a bit of time together, just the two of us wandering around the show, and we stumbled across a yarn booth essentially, and it was the Romney Marsh Wools booth. Is that show up there? And I picked up some woolly wash, as they call it, biodegradable, environmentally friendly, not tested on animals. So it's just some wool wash because I don't have any wool wash, and I've been needing to get some while I was here. So and I like it because it's got instructions on how to use it for the machine as well. So from now on, I know in the past I've said I've just used regular detergent, but I've noticed after some time that it's not degrading my hand knit socks, but I'm noticing a difference. They're not as soft as they were before, so I'm just going to start using wool wash to wash my socks in the machine. And I'm not sure if it's the same for all wool wash, but with this one it just says you just use one capful for, at least ours is a front loader, so one capful for a front loader, 2 for a top loader, and that's it. You don't put any other detergent in there, you don't put anything else in with the load, and you just put it on the appropriate wool cycle in your machine. So that, I haven't tried it out yet, but I think we are slowly accruing another pile of socks to be washed, so I'll be doing that soon. Okay, she's definitely not sleeping, so I'm gonna go grab her and come back and finish this off, hopefully with a little toddler co-host. We'll see how that goes. So I am back now with a little post-nap Layla sat right here next to me. I can get you over here a little bit. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh. Found some bubble wrap. Thanks. Perfect. Just what we need today. More rustling. Anyway, so back to acquisitions. I have one last little package to show you. I was surprised to get this because I got another package from Knitcrate, which I wasn't expecting, but also if you saw my last podcast you'll have seen the stuff I got from Knitcrate in that one. I didn't do a separate Knitcrate video this month, I just didn't have time, but they sent me one of their artisan boxes or crates, which I wasn't expecting because they don't usually send me that one. But I just thought I'd show you really quickly what came in it. They sent, so with this one you get 2 skeins of yarn, the patterns, and a little something extra. So the patterns, there's a beginner pattern and a intermediate advanced pattern. So the beginner pattern is the Apex shawl, and the intermediate above and advanced is a beret and gloves pattern. Okay, Layla wants the card, so yeah, you want to show people that one? You want to show that one? Yeah, I'll be sit on my lap then people can see. Yeah, it's Layla. And the yarn they sent was this beautiful yarn by Fleece Artist. It looks like one giant skein, but it's actually 2 skeins wound together. Do you want to show it? Oh, is it pretty? What do you think? According to the card, it is the Catalyst colorway, and it's 70% superfine merino and 30% tencel, which I believe is like a man-made fibre, similar to give like the effect of silk. Yeah? I was planning on using this yarn for a giveaway, honey, but you look like you're getting quite attached to it. Anyway, and the little something extra they sent this month was a pack of buttons. It's a bit shiny, so if you can't see that very clearly. Just a bunch of small buttons. Okay. Yeah, does it make a good noise? You like that? Shake, 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 shake. Shake, shake, shake. More. Yeah. Can you see yourself on the camera? Okay, so that's it for acquisitions. I feel like there was quite a bit of talking there. But in terms of giveaways and Knit Along news, I kind of covered that a little bit earlier. There are 2 prize winners from the last podcast from the Wanderlust Club that still haven't contacted me yet about their prizes. The winners are, they were number 331 Country Bumps and number 231, which is Scritno, SCR1TNO. So please, if you are winners, please get in touch with me as soon as possible. I think probably around the 20th to 22nd of June will be when I record the prize winners video for the next set of prizes, and if you have not gotten in touch with me by then I'm going to redraw prize winners. I'm going to redraw prize winners for the unclaimed prizes. So this is fair warning. I think I announced these prizes some like mid-May, so there's been about 3 weeks by now. So that by the next time I podcast, like I said, if you haven't been in touch, I will redraw those winners. Can I have this yarn back, please, honey? Can I have it back? Thank you. You can play with Annabelle. You want to shake the buttons? Shake, 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 shake. This is her teddy for sleeping, which she's just become obsessed with. It's actually one of my old teddies from when I was little, and it's a little bit grimy. It's been in the garage for a while. I don't know why she's so attached to this one. I'm starting to think I'm gonna have to start rotating in other teddies because I'm worried that she's gonna get super attached to just one, and then never, and if something happens to it, we'll be in trouble. But moving on to weekend review, I guess, essentially. I mentioned that I'm gonna be back in New York at the end of next week for a few days. I'm gonna miss this little nugget, but she's gonna have a lot of fun with her dad and Granny and her grandparents in general. Yeah. And then I also mentioned about the destash earlier as well, so make sure you check that out if you're interested. Like I said, there's gonna be a whole bunch of stuff that just need to go to good homes. And then Layla's now 15 months old. She's about 15 and a half months old now. Yeah, she's started saying a few new words. She's the nursery have said to us that sometimes she'll go up, if she's in the corridor, she'll go up to where her jacket's hanging up, point to her jacket and say mine. And we've noticed at home that she has this fish toy that she absolutely loves. It's like a fish bowl with these colourful fish that you can just put in, that you learn to put into the slots and stuff. And she started saying, we refer to it as fishies, and she started saying ishies and meaning fishies. So that's been really cute as well. And she's she's saying a lot of things, but in her own little language, which, to be quite honest, I'm not worried about her language development. We speak 2 languages with her at home, so she's, and I know bilingual children start talking a little bit later than single language children, just because they are processing 2 languages rather than 1. Yeah. Sorry if that's annoying for anybody, but it's keeping her happy, so I'm not gonna take it off her. Yeah.
What?
Uh-huh. You want to say hi to the people, lovely people out there on the internet? Yeah. You're being very good. Yeah. Okay. I mentioned about the Heathfield show, so that was a lot of fun, and I did do a vlog for that weekend. Okay. Yes, I know. I did a vlog for that weekend, so if you're interested in going to see that, yeah. So if you're interested in seeing that, you can check that video out as well. And there was also another vlog that went up from the weekend prior to that, where we spent a day out in London with my mum and Layla and Perry, the 4 of us, around the South Bank and Trafalgar Square sort of area, which I had forgotten to post. So that is also up as well. And then yesterday we had our first trip to the dentist for the little one. She now has 14 teeth. And I think there's like 1 or 2 more coming through, so her teeth are coming through thick and fast. She's going to have them all pretty soon. But yeah, things are going well, and I just had a general little check-up as well. Oh, what do you want now? Do you want Teddy? Yeah, you can't have the camera. You can sit where you can see the camera, but you can't have it. What would you like? Oh.
Mama.
Yeah, you want buttons. Oh, thank you. That. Oh, honey. Yeah. You want this? You want the yarn, don't you? Oh. Yeah? You happy now?
Mama.
Yeah? Do you want to tell us what you think of the yarn? You give us your review. I should say it's actually very soft. It's got a nice sheen to it. It has that sort of like silk sheen to it, but it's really soft yarn, and I can imagine this would be really lovely to knit with. Yeah. In terms of other things that are going on, she still loves being outside. She still loves to empty the dishwasher. We actually have to go empty the dishwasher after I finish this. And yeah, and I also mentioned that Hugo and Derek are coming home, which I am really excited about. Oh, you went to grab the buttons again. And yeah, so we've just been spending a lot of our time for the last few days, last week pretty much, has been spent trying to figure out the logistics of bringing the cats home, finding somewhere for us to stay, organising, like all sorts of stuff. Like, it's been a bit mental, to be honest. Everything's happening within a very short space of time, and it's just a bit chaotic. Yeah? Where are you going? That's Mummy's phone. You want that too? Yeah. Okay. I think that pretty much covers it, to be honest. I'm sorry the end of this got a little bit distracting with her, but I know you guys enjoy seeing her, so hopefully that wasn't too distracting for you guys. And yeah, thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate it. I can't remember if there were any questions in the group. Let me have a quick little look in the group and see if there were any new questions to answer. I think there might have been, actually. Okay. Oh, okay, somewhat relevant question as well. So Cookie and Peaches has asked, I'm currently watching your most recent podcast, which is the last one I posted, and you go into more detail about your design process and how many hours you put into knitting each day and week. She says, I'm in awe of your knitting time, and I'm curious about how you manage fatigue or repetitive stress from so much knitting. To be honest, yeah. To be honest, no, don't put that in your mouth, honey. Okay, I'm gonna take this off you now. Can I have that back, please? Okay, come back. Oh, no, you just wanna You just want to be silly now. Okay, so the way I do that is just take frequent breaks. To be honest, with a little one, I don't always get a whole lot of like knitting time in one shot anymore. It's like 1 hour here, like a couple of hours there when she's napping or something during the day. She's not happy at me with me because I took the yarn away. Oh, there you go. Yeah. So yeah, just try and take frequent breaks. It would be my advice. I've been quite lucky in that I've never really... No, honey, you can't have that now. In that I've never really had much issue with RSI or repetitive strange injuries with my wrists and stuff. She's determined. But yes, I've been quite lucky in that regard. But I guess my only real advice would be take frequent breaks and stretch. Make sure you stretch your wrists and you stretch your hands out. And I'm pretty sure you could just YouTube some exercises that you can do to like help prevent RSI and stuff like that. So that's really my only advice, to be honest. I feel like I knit a lot less these days than I did before Layla was born. I used to knit a lot more than I do now, and I didn't have any issues then, so I don't really have much in the way of issues now either. So, but if I ever do feel a bit of fatigue or anything coming on, I do just take a break, essentially. Alright, I better get going because I don't know what she's getting into now back on the other side of the room, and I will catch up with you guys soon. Thank you so much for checking in with me, and I will see you guys soon. Take care. Bye.